Have you ever wondered what truly happens when we die? Is it lights out, just nothing? Or is death simply a doorway, a transition into something we've forgotten, but somehow always known? The Buddha didn't offer speculation. He offered insight, born from deep meditation and direct experience. In today's journey, we won't talk about death to fear it. We will talk about it to understand it. Because only by understanding death can we learn how to truly live. So breathe in, gently. Let your heart be still. And walk with me into what the Buddha revealed about death, rebirth, and the possibility of liberation. There is a moment, quiet, still, and utterly beyond words, that each one of us will meet. A moment when the breath stops, when the body no longer responds, when the pulse fades and the warmth leaves the skin. That moment, we call death. Yet for something so inevitable, so universal, and so near to each of us, we know so little. And perhaps, more than not knowing, we are afraid to know. We live in a culture that fears death. It hides it behind curtains, softens it with euphemisms, and distracts from it with noise. People speak of it in hushed tones, as though even mentioning it might somehow invite it into the room. We chase youth, worship longevity, and push away the reality that everything, at some point, must end. But the Buddha taught a different way. Not to turn away from death, but to look deeply into its nature. Not to fear it, but to understand it. According to the Dhamma, to contemplate death is not a morbid obsession, it is an awakening. When we truly contemplate death, we wake up from the illusion of permanence. We see clearly that everything is changing. This body, these thoughts, the people we love, the circumstances we grasp at. Nothing remains unchanged, and in that truth lies great freedom. Because if we understand impermanence, we begin to release our clinging. And when we release clinging, we begin to taste peace. But first, we must ask honestly, what is it that we fear about death? Is it the pain? The unknown? The idea of ceasing to exist? Or perhaps it is not death we fear, but the idea that we might have lived without meaning, that our days passed in distraction, our hearts closed, and our time squandered. The Buddha's teaching offers an answer, not in the form of dogma, but in a path of insight. He invites us to ask not merely, what happens when we die, but also, what is this life? Who is it that dies? And can anything truly end? The Buddha did not speak of death as a final stop, but as a transformation. He saw birth and death not as two isolated events, but as points in a vast continuum. He taught that what we call a person is not a fixed entity but a flowing process. Body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, 5 aggregates in constant motion. When these come together, we experience what we call life. When they cease to function together, we call it death. But the process continues, just as a river continues to flow even as its waters change. To the Buddha, understanding death required first understanding life. Who is it that is born? Who is it that dies? If we look deeply, we find that there is no solid self to be found, only conditions arising and passing away. Thoughts arise, emotions come and go, the body changes moment by moment. Even the idea of I is a mental construction, a story we repeat until it feels real. But when we examine it in meditation, we see its emptiness, and in seeing this emptiness, we become free, not in a nihilistic sense, but in the deepest sense of liberation. This is why death, in the Dhamma, is not an end to fear, but a teacher to embrace. When the Buddha was asked, what happens after death? He did not answer with speculation. He pointed instead to the root. Understand the nature of the self, and you will understand the nature of death. Look into the impermanence of all things, and the fear of death will dissolve like mist in the morning sun. He shared parables to make this truth accessible. One such story is of a mother named Kisa Gautami, whose child died in her arms. In her grief, she wandered in madness, begging anyone for medicine to bring her child back. The Buddha told her he would provide it, if she could bring him a mustard seed from a household that had not known death. She searched every home and found that no such house existed. In this way, she came to see that death is not personal. It is the shared sorrow of all living beings. This realization opened her heart, and she became a disciple, awakening to the truth of impermanence. This story is not simply historical. It speaks to our modern lives, where we too seek cures for our suffering, perhaps not in mustard seeds, but in distractions, in possessions, in control. Yet true healing comes not from denying death, but from accepting it as a natural part of existence. The more we avoid death, the more power it holds over us. But when we look into it with the light of wisdom, we find not darkness, but clarity. The Buddha taught Maranasati, the mindfulness of death, as a daily practice. Not to create fear, but to keep the mind grounded in reality. By remembering that life is short, we cherish our moments. By remembering that death is certain, we prioritize what truly matters. This is not morbid, it is compassionate. It opens the heart. It cuts through illusion. It reveals the sacredness of now. In the West, many imagine death as the opposite of life. But in Buddhist understanding, death is part of life's rhythm, like the pause between breaths, the silence between notes. It is not to be fought, but to be understood. And understanding requires stillness. It requires courage. And it requires a willingness to go beyond what we think we know. That is what this journey is about. Not to give you answers to believe, but questions to sit with. What happens after death? Is there something that continues? If so, what is it? If not, then what are we clinging to? These are not questions to answer quickly, but to contemplate slowly, with presence and humility. Let us take this inquiry seriously, but gently. Let us not be in a rush. For when we bring mindfulness to death, we also bring mindfulness to life. We live more deeply. We love more fully. We forgive more easily. And we awaken to what the Buddha called the deathless, that which is beyond birth and death, beyond coming and going, beyond self and other. Death, then, is not the end. It is a mirror. It reflects back to us what we have been running from. And if we have the courage to look, we will find that within this mirror is the invitation to awaken. Let us walk this path together, slowly, mindfully, with open hearts. For in understanding death, we discover how to live without fear. And in living without fear, we step closer to true peace. To understand what the Buddha truly taught about death, we must first understand the context in which he taught. He was not a philosopher in an ivory tower, nor a mystic removed from the suffering of the world. He was a seeker, like many of us, who had seen suffering, loss, aging, illness, and death firsthand. Before he became the Buddha, he was a prince named Siddhartha, shielded from the hardships of life. But one day, he encountered four sights: an old man, a sick person, a corpse, and a wandering ascetic. These sights shattered his illusion of safety and control. They confronted him with the truth that no matter how wealthy, powerful, or privileged one might be, death would still come. And this realization awakened in him a profound question: is there a way to understand this life and this death so deeply that suffering can be ended? The Buddha did not teach death as a philosophical idea, but as a lived experience. He invited us to turn our attention not to abstract speculation, but to direct observation of the body, the mind, and the unfolding of life moment by moment. From the beginning, his path was about seeing things as they are, not how we wish them to be. And when it comes to death, we often wish it to be something distant, theoretical, avoidable. But the Buddha urged his disciples to bring it close. to sit with it, to contemplate it, to see its presence in every breath, every heartbeat, every rising and falling of sensation. In the Pali Canon, one of the earliest collections of the Buddhist teachings, we find many references to death, not as something grim, but as something to be understood deeply. The Buddha would often say, "Of all the footprints, that of the elephant is supreme. Likewise, of all contemplations, that on death is supreme." This statement reveals something profound. It is not that death is the most frightening subject, but that it is the most clarifying. When we see death clearly, we see life more clearly too. In one famous sutta, a monk comes to the Buddha and asks, "How should I meditate?" The Buddha replies, "Contemplate death." The monk asks, "How often should I do this?" The Buddha says, "At least once a day." But another monk asks the same question, and when told to contemplate death, he asks, "Is once a day enough?" The Buddha replies, "No, you should contemplate death with every breath." This is not an instruction meant to burden the mind with anxiety. Rather, it is a teaching that invites us to be fully alive, because we recognize how fleeting this moment truly is. The Buddha described the body as impermanent, prone to decay, not truly ours. He taught that what we call a self is really a process, composed of 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. At death, these aggregates separate. The physical body returns to the elements. The mind stream, conditioned by karma, continues on, just as a flame passes from one candle to another. The continuity of consciousness moves forward, not as a fixed soul, but as a causal process. This view is subtle, but essential. It avoids the extremes of eternalism and nihilism. There is no eternal self to be reborn. And yet, actions have consequences. Continuity exists, not identity. This is why the Buddha did not answer speculative questions like, "Does the self exist after death?" or "Where exactly does the mind go?" When a disciple pressed him for answers, the Buddha remained silent, not because he did not know, but because such questions often lead to confusion rather than liberation. He explained that these are not useful questions for awakening. Instead, he pointed to the present. Observe how things arise and pass away now. In this very body and mind, that is where truth can be found. To understand death in the Buddha's teaching is to see it not as an event, but as part of a continuum. We are dying every moment. Cells in our body are dying. Thoughts arise and fade. Moods come and go. The person you were a year ago, or 10 years ago, no longer exists. Yet there is a continuity of experience. Death, then, is not a sharp line, but a continuation of this flow. And rebirth is not a transfer of a soul, but the arising of new conditions based on old causes. This is not merely theory. The Buddha taught that these truths can be known directly through deep meditation. Practitioners who reach high levels of concentration and insight may recall past lives. They may see the movement of consciousness after death. These are not powers to show off, but insights to develop compassion and wisdom. Seeing the vastness of existence, the suffering of beings caught in endless cycles of birth and death, the mind naturally turns toward liberation. But even for those who do not recall past lives, the teachings offer a profound comfort. They tell us that death is not the end, that goodness matters, that our intentions, actions, and thoughts shape not only this life but what comes after. This empowers us. It means that our lives are not random, not meaningless. Even the smallest act of kindness, the briefest moment of mindfulness, carries weight. It matters. And so, we return to the question, what happens when we die? According to the Buddha, what happens is a continuation, a movement conditioned by our past actions, guided by our final states of mind. The moment of death is not the time to suddenly change everything. It is a mirror of how we have lived. If we have cultivated peace, mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, then the transition is smooth, like a candle passing its flame. But if we have lived with hatred, fear, and confusion, the transition can be turbulent. This is why the Buddha emphasized preparation, not in the sense of material arrangements, but in the cultivation of the heart. To prepare for death is to live fully now, to speak truthfully, to act kindly, to think wisely, to reflect daily on the impermanence of life. In this way, death becomes not an interruption, but a fulfillment, not a tragedy, but a homecoming. We often imagine that the teachings on death are for the elderly or the sick. But the Buddha taught them to everyone, regardless of age, because death is not only what happens at the end, it is a teacher at every stage. The young can die, the strong can fall, the busy can be interrupted. To live with death in the heart is to live awake. It is to value what we often take for granted. A breath, a smile, a moment of stillness. These are not small things. They are precious, because they are fleeting. So what did the Buddha teach about death? He taught that it is real, but not terrifying, that it is natural, but not final, that it is a doorway, not a wall, and above all, he taught that it is something we can understand, not in books, but in the quiet observation of our own mind and body. This understanding brings great freedom, because when we no longer fear death, we no longer fear life. We stop clinging, we stop running, we begin to rest in the reality of now. And from that resting, wisdom arises. The Buddha once said, "Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life." To live with the awareness of death is to live spiritually. It is to live intentionally. It is to ask, again and again, what really matters? What can I let go of? What seeds am I planting in my heart? These are the questions that death asks us, not with words, but with silence. And if we are quiet enough, still enough, honest enough, we may begin to hear the answers. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is a profound emphasis on understanding the workings of the mind, especially at the moment of death, because death is not simply the end of the physical body. According to the Dhamma, what truly continues is not the flesh and bone, but the flow of consciousness, the energy of awareness shaped by our karma, by the seeds we have planted throughout our lives. This flow of consciousness is subtle and difficult to perceive without deep meditation. But through mindfulness and insight, we can begin to notice how our thoughts arise and fall away, how moods shift, how identity itself is a shifting, impermanent process. The Buddha likened consciousness to a flame. It lights up, it flickers, it moves from one condition to another. And just like a flame that passes from one candle to the next, the stream of consciousness carries the karmic imprint of this life into the next. What happens at the moment of death is deeply influenced by the quality of the mind. This is why the Buddha emphasized the importance of mental training, not just for the sake of peace in daily life, but for the crucial moment of transition when the body releases its final breath. In that moment, the mind, untethered from the body, moves toward a new birth. If the mind is confused, fearful, angry, or deeply attached, it may gravitate toward realms of suffering. But if the mind is calm, clear, and filled with wholesome qualities, such as generosity, compassion, and wisdom, then it may be reborn in peaceful and fortunate realms. This understanding shifts the way we look at death. Instead of seeing it as a sudden and arbitrary end, we begin to see it as the unfolding of a natural law, the law of cause and effect, of karma. And just as a tree grows from the seeds we plant, our future states of existence grow from the habits of mind we cultivate now. The Buddha taught that the moment of death is not the time to start spiritual practice. It is the time when our previous practice bears fruit. For this reason, he encouraged continuous mindfulness, daily reflection on impermanence, and regular acts of merit, because these create the mental environment in which a peaceful death becomes possible. It is not enough to wish for a calm and joyful passing. We must prepare the mind gradually, gently, patiently, over time. In many Buddhist cultures, there is a deep tradition of surrounding the dying with chanting, prayers, and recitations of the Dhamma. This is not superstition. It is based on the understanding that the mind at the moment of death is extremely sensitive. It is easily influenced by sounds, thoughts, emotions, so creating an atmosphere of peace, spiritual presence, and loving support can help guide the consciousness toward a higher rebirth. The Buddha himself described how beings pass from one life to another. He used the analogy of a traveler lighting one lamp from another, walking across the darkness with each flame lighting the way. Rebirth is not a transfer of a soul, but the continuation of a stream. And in this stream, every intention matters, every act leaves a trace. There are countless stories in the Buddhist texts of people who, through sincere practice and the cultivation of wholesome mind states, were able to pass away peacefully and with clarity. Some were aware of the exact moment of death. Others experienced visions of radiant beings, of peaceful realms, or of loved ones welcoming them. While these stories are not to be clung to as beliefs, they serve to illustrate the central point. The mind creates the conditions for its own journey. At the same time, the Buddha also warned of minds clouded by craving, aversion, and delusion. When a person dies with unresolved hatred, with deep attachments or regrets, these mental states can pull the stream of consciousness into darker states of being, what we refer to as lower realms. These are not punishments, but natural consequences of the mind's energy. Just as a seed determines the type of plant that grows, the quality of our thoughts and actions determines the conditions of our rebirth. This understanding is not meant to create fear, but responsibility. It tells us that every moment is important, that we are not helpless, that through practice, through mindfulness, ethical living, and spiritual inquiry, we can shape our future, both in this life and beyond. So what does it mean to live in a way that prepares for a peaceful death? It means being honest with ourselves, looking at our attachments, letting go, little by little, of the things we cannot hold forever. It means forgiving others, forgiving ourselves, making peace with what has been, and above all, it means learning to be present, not only during the joyful moments, but also when life is difficult, uncertain, or painful. The Buddha often said, just as a farmer waters his crops, so does a wise person cultivate the heart. The heart, in this teaching, is not just the seat of emotion, it is the center of our moral and spiritual life. A heart filled with loving kindness, with equanimity, with understanding. This is the heart that faces death without fear. In meditation, we practice dying every day. We let go of the past. We release the future. We sit with the breath, knowing it may be the last. This does not create anxiety, it creates freedom. Because it trains the mind to be here, now, fully alive. And when the final breath comes, the mind is ready. It knows the way. It walks calmly into the unknown, with clarity and grace. There is a story from the Buddhist tradition of a monk who was very ill. Nearing the end of his life, his disciples asked him, "Are you afraid?" He smiled gently and said, "I have been practicing death every day. There is nothing to fear. This body was never mine. The mind is just passing through. What remains is peace." And then he closed his eyes, breathed out slowly, and did not breathe again. This is not a fantasy. It is a possibility, a fruit of practice. Not only for monks, but for all who walk the path of mindfulness, who live with sincerity and care. The death of such a person is not an end. but a continuation of their deepest values. It is an offering to the world. And so we return to the core of the Buddha's teaching, that death is not separate from life. That the way we live each day is the way we will meet our final day. If we are mindful now, we will be mindful then. If we are kind now, we will be kind then. If we are attached and angry now, that too will come with us. The Buddha said, with our thoughts, we make the world. This includes the world we are born into after this one ends. So let us make our thoughts noble. Let us purify the mind. Let us live each day as if it were both the first and the last. Not in fear, but in reverence. Death is a teacher. It does not take away life, it gives it depth. When we remember death, we begin to live differently. We listen more closely. We speak more gently. We act with greater compassion. We stop postponing what truly matters. We show up. This is the gift of contemplating death in the light of the Dhamma. It is not a darkness, but a doorway. It leads us inward, to the essence of what we are. And when we find that essence beyond form, beyond name, beyond fear, we discover something timeless, something deathless. And so, when the final breath comes, we will not resist. We will smile, bow to this life, and step forward, not into an end, but into another beginning, with mindfulness, with peace, with freedom. If we want to understand what happens after death, we cannot avoid the law that shapes it, the law of karma. In Western cultures, karma is often misunderstood as a kind of cosmic justice, where good people are rewarded and bad people are punished. But the Buddha taught karma not as a system of reward and punishment, but as the law of cause and effect. Whatever we think, say, or do creates an imprint. That imprint conditions future experiences. The results may ripen in this life, or in lives to come, but they are never lost. Karma is not a judge, it is a mirror. It reflects what we carry inside. At the heart of the Buddha's teaching is the understanding that every action, especially those done with intention, has consequences. These consequences are not always immediate. A kind word may plant a seed of peace that flowers years later. A cruel deed may seem to pass unnoticed, but reappear as suffering down the line. Karma is subtle. It doesn't always follow a straight line, but it always follows a pattern. Like a farmer who plants a mango tree will not harvest thorns. We too will reap the flavor of what we sow. This means our future is not fixed, but shaped by our choices. It is not our birth or background that determines our fate, but the qualities of mind and heart we cultivate. This is both empowering and humbling. We are the authors of our lives, but we are also bound by the stories we write. If we cling to anger, greed, and delusion, we bind ourselves to suffering. If we cultivate generosity, compassion, and wisdom, we create the causes for peace. Karma is not only personal, it also functions collectively. Entire communities, nations, and even worlds arise based on shared actions and mental states. This is why the Buddha taught that the mind is the forerunner of all things. Our thoughts build the world, both inwardly and outwardly. They construct not only our character, but also the conditions into which we are reborn. In Buddhist cosmology, there are many realms of rebirth. The human realm is just one among 6 primary realms. There are realms of heavenly bliss, where beings enjoy long lifespans and subtle pleasures, born from vast merit. There are hell realms, where intense suffering results from hatred and cruelty. There are realms of hungry ghosts, beings tormented by insatiable craving. Animal realms, where beings live in fear, driven by instinct. Asura realms, where beings are trapped in endless conflict and jealousy. And then there is the human realm, uniquely balanced between suffering and freedom, between clarity and confusion. The human realm is considered precious not because it is easy, But because it offers the best conditions for awakening, we suffer enough to be motivated to seek the path. But we are also capable of understanding the Dhamma, of practicing mindfulness and letting go. This is why the Buddha said that being born human is rare and not to be wasted. Every moment here can be used to shape our future lives, and eventually to transcend the cycle altogether. Rebirth, then, is not a matter of luck. It is not determined by external gods or forces. It is the natural unfolding of our habits of mind. Just as a musician who plays the same notes every day will naturally move toward a certain melody, our thoughts and actions move toward certain kinds of existence. Angry minds gravitate toward conflict, generous minds toward abundance, deluded minds toward confusion, wise minds toward clarity and liberation. When we die, the physical body dissolves, but the karmic stream continues. It seeks conditions in harmony with its tendencies. A being filled with greed and attachment may be drawn to a form where those qualities can be expressed. A being who has trained in virtue and wisdom may be drawn to realms where those qualities can mature further. This is not fate, it is pattern. It is like water flowing downhill, following the channels it has carved over time. In some cases, karma from a distant past may ripen at the moment of death. In other cases, it is the most recent actions or the strongest tendencies that determine the next birth. This is why the Buddha emphasized the importance of both lifelong practice and final mindfulness. A wholesome act near the end of life can powerfully influence the transition. Just as a boat gently nudged in a new direction before it drifts out to sea. This does not mean we should panic if our past is full of unwholesome actions. The Dhamma is not fatalistic. It teaches that transformation is always possible. Each moment of mindfulness, of compassion, of letting go plants a new seed. And when those seeds are nourished, they grow stronger than the seeds of past ignorance. This is why spiritual practice is so urgent. We are not guaranteed another human life. We do not know how long we have, but we know this moment is here. And in this moment, we can choose a direction. Karma also explains why beings experience different conditions at birth. Some are born into wealth, health, and loving families. Others into poverty, illness, and conflict. These are not signs of divine punishment or reward. They are simply results of past conditions. And while we may not always know the causes, we can respond to them with wisdom. Whatever our situation, we can make new choices. We can break the cycle. That is the promise of the path. The Buddha never taught karma as a weapon to judge others. He taught it as a mirror for self-understanding. It invites us to take responsibility, not blame. It shows us the power of our own minds and the importance of inner purification. When we speak kindly, when we help another, when we forgive ourselves, we are not only shaping this life, we are shaping future lives. We are creating a momentum toward awakening. And yet, karma is not the only force at play. The Buddha also taught about effort, wisdom, and liberation. Even if one's karma is heavy, the light of insight can shine through. A single moment of awakening can end lifetimes of suffering. This is why the Buddha's path is not merely ethical, it is transformational. It goes beyond good and bad, beyond merit and demerit. It leads to freedom itself. So as we reflect on death and rebirth, we reflect also on karma, not as superstition, but as a call to live intentionally. To ask, again and again, what am I planting today? Where is my mind moving? What kind of world am I preparing for myself? If we live with this awareness, death loses its sting. It becomes simply a pause, a change of scenery. The story continues, shaped by the ink of our intentions. And if we live with deep attention, the story may one day come to a beautiful end, not in darkness, but in awakening. To be born again and again is not the problem. The problem is ignorance. It is clinging to forms that change. It is not seeing that what we seek, peace, joy, freedom, is not found in any realm, but in the very understanding of impermanence. When we see clearly, even for a moment, the whole cycle begins to loosen. And when we truly see, there may come a time when rebirth is no longer needed, when the fire of craving is extinguished, when the heart is fully free. This is the direction of the path. And karma, far from being a burden, becomes a map. It shows us where we have been, but more importantly, it shows us how to go beyond. There is a beautiful and deep truth found in the Buddha's teachings, that even though we may be born and die many times over, the essence of our suffering does not lie in the cycles themselves. It lies in our ignorance of their nature. What we fear about death is, in truth, rooted in what we misunderstand about life. And what we seek in life, peace, fulfillment, safety, can only be found when we begin to look closely, patiently, and with clarity at what truly is, rather than what we wish things to be. In many sutras, the Buddha speaks of a place beyond birth and death. He called it the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unconditioned. He said, "There is that which is not born, not come to be, not made, not conditioned." If there were not such a realm, there would be no escape from the born, the come to be, the made, the conditioned. What does this mean? It means that liberation is not another realm to be reborn into, but the ending of rebirth altogether. It is the cessation of craving, of clinging, of identifying with that which changes. And this realization is not reserved only for saints or monks, it is possible, in degrees, for anyone who practices deeply. But the path to that realization is gradual. Like climbing a mountain, we begin with moral conduct, choosing to live in a way that does not harm others, that supports peace rather than conflict. Then we develop concentration, training the mind to rest on a single object, to become still and stable. From that stillness arises insight, the ability to see clearly the nature of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. And as this vision deepens, something shifts. We no longer chase what is fleeting. We no longer resist what comes. We begin to rest in a spacious, open awareness that is not bound by the body or the mind. In this space, death is no longer seen as an enemy. It is understood simply as a change in conditions. Just as the sun rises and sets, just as the ocean tide flows in and out, so too life appears and disappears. But what remains, the awareness that knows all this, is not touched. It is not born, and it does not die. It watches, it knows, it is still. And yet, for most of us, we are still very much entangled in the world of form. We are attached to our bodies, our identities, our memories, our hopes for the future. We carry regrets. We fear letting go. This is natural. The human heart longs for meaning. We want our lives to count. We want to feel that we belong somewhere, that our story has a purpose. This longing is not wrong, but if we cling to it too tightly, it becomes a prison. The Buddha taught that freedom comes not by rejecting the world, but by seeing it clearly. To love, but not to grasp. To act, but not to expect. To give, but not to demand. This is the middle way, not indulgence, not denial, but a steady walk between. And this way of being prepares us not only for living well, but for dying well. A peaceful death is not an accident. It is the result of a life lived with attention, with compassion, with understanding. It is not determined by wealth, by fame, or even by health. It is determined by the state of the heart. A heart that has let go, that is not afraid of what it cannot control, that trusts in the Dhamma. This heart does not tremble at the end. There are many stories in the Buddhist tradition of those who passed away with clarity and grace. Laypeople, not just monks, who spent their final hours chanting, reflecting on the precepts, offering forgiveness, or simply resting in silent mindfulness. These stories remind us that liberation is not far away. It is not in another life. It is here, in this breath, this step, this moment of awareness. And if we live each moment with care, death becomes not a rupture, but a continuation. Sometimes we may feel that awakening is too distant, that we are too caught up in worldly life, too distracted, too imperfect. But the Buddha never said perfection was required. He said effort, sincerity, and gradual practice are the path. Even one step in the right direction matters. Even one moment of genuine awareness can plant a seed that blossoms later. The path is not about arriving, it is about walking. Every time we choose mindfulness over reactivity, compassion over anger, stillness over distraction, we are practicing for our death. And in doing so, we are practicing for our true life. To reflect on death is not to become obsessed with endings. It is to awaken to the preciousness of beginnings. Each morning we wake is a new birth. Each moment we release the past is a kind of death. In this way, we train ourselves gently, wisely, to let go without fear. And as this letting go deepens, the grip of ego loosens. We stop seeing ourselves as fixed, separate beings, and start to experience life as a fluid, interconnected whole. This shift in perception is not only spiritual, it is practical. When we live with death in mind, we treat people differently, we listen more, we judge less, we say, "I love you," more often. We waste less time, we forgive more easily, because we realize how short this life really is. And we also begin to care for our mind more intentionally, knowing that what we carry at the end is not our bank account, not our achievements, but the quality of our consciousness. So we return again and again to practice, to the breath, to the body, to the fleeting sensations and thoughts, not to escape the world, but to become fully present to it. The more present we are, the more alive we become. And the more alive we are, the more gracefully we can release life when the time comes. The Buddha encouraged us to reflect. This body is impermanent. It will age, it will grow ill, it will die, not as a cause for sadness, but as an invitation to live deeply. He also taught, whatever has the nature to arise also has the nature to cease. This is the way of all things. Nothing in this world is truly ours. Everything is borrowed, passing, flowing. When we understand this, not just intellectually, but in our bones, we become free. Freedom does not mean escaping death. It means no longer being ruled by the fear of it. It means being able to look at life and say, "I am here. I am awake, and I accept this moment as it is." When we die with that kind of heart, there is no regret, there is no grasping, only peace. And so we walk the path not to gain something, but to uncover what has always been here. The deathless, the unborn, the unshakable. This is not a place, it is a realization. A shift in perception, a falling away of what is false, and a resting in what is real. As we move forward in our exploration of death and rebirth, let us remember this. It is not knowledge that frees us, but direct experience. Let us not be content with beliefs. Let us practice. Let us observe. Let us reflect. Let us open the heart to what is beyond thought. And when the moment comes, when the breath shortens, when the body weakens, when the senses fade, may we meet it not as strangers, but as friends, not in fear, but in trust, for we will have walked with awareness. And in that awareness, death is no longer the end. It is simply the next unfolding of the path. In the silence of a still moment, when we are not distracted by movement or sound, something deeper begins to reveal itself. It is in this quiet that we come face to face with impermanence. The breath rises and falls. Thoughts come and go. Emotions arise like waves and then dissolve. Even the body, which we so often identify with, begins to feel like a temporary vessel, changing from moment to moment. This direct experience is what the Buddha encouraged us to observe, not through belief, but through awareness. Through this simple noticing, we begin to see nothing we cling to can last forever. And yet, even knowing this truth, the mind often resists. It wants permanence. It wants certainty. It wants control. This is the tension we all live with. On one hand, we see things changing. On the other, we crave stability. But the more we resist change, the more we suffer. The more we accept it, not with resignation, but with openness, the more peace we find. This is the wisdom of letting go. When people speak of the fear of death, it is often not death itself they fear, but the letting go of loved ones, of the body, of identity, of plans and unfinished dreams. But in truth, we are letting go all the time. Every night when we fall asleep, we surrender the world. Every moment we breathe out, we release what we held. And every day that passes, the person we were yesterday is no longer the same. When we begin to see death not as a single event, but as a continuous process of letting go, it becomes less terrifying. It becomes natural. The Buddha's teachings are clear on this point. Whatever is born will die. Whatever begins will end. The wise do not mourn this, they understand it. And because they understand it, they live differently. They are not caught in the illusion of permanence. They do not cling to youth, or health, or status. Instead, they use this precious, brief life as an opportunity to awaken, to develop the heart, to cultivate compassion, wisdom, and presence. This is not a path of retreat from life, but a deeper engagement with it. When we know something will not last, we pay more attention, we savor it, we offer our presence, we become more honest, more kind, more forgiving, because we know we don't have forever. Death is the great equalizer. It comes to the rich and the poor, the young and the old, the wise and the unwise. No one escapes it, and yet, very few prepare for it. We prepare for jobs, for marriage, for retirement, but rarely do we prepare for the one thing that is certain. The Buddha encouraged us to reflect often on death, not to create fear, but to create urgency, not to become morbid, but to become mindful. Because when we remember death, we remember what matters most. Imagine living each day as if it were your last, not with anxiety, but with clarity. Would you still hold that grudge? Would you still postpone kindness? Would you still waste your attention on trivial things? Or would you speak more gently, love more deeply, listen more fully? This is what the contemplation of death awakens in us, not despair, but depth. And in this deepening, something beautiful happens. We begin to shift our focus from achievement to presence, from accumulation to generosity, from being right to being kind, from seeking validation to offering understanding. Because we realize that when we die, it is not our possessions we take with us, it is our states of mind, our habits of heart, our actions of love. In many Buddhist cultures, people recite chants and mantras daily to remind themselves of the fleeting nature of life. Some reflect on the 5 remembrances, that we are of the nature to grow old, to fall ill, to die, to be separated from all we love, and that our only true belongings are our actions. These are not meant to be depressing. They are meant to wake us up, to shake us gently out of forgetfulness, to bring us back to what is real. This remembrance gives rise to a beautiful quality in the heart: equanimity. Equanimity is not indifference, it is balance. It is the ability to meet life as it is, with openness, with steadiness, with compassion, and without clinging. When we develop equanimity, we can face aging without fear. We can meet loss without collapse. We can encounter death, not with dread, but with dignity. Equanimity also allows us to support others as they face death. We can be a calm presence, a steady hand, a loving companion. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can offer the dying is not words, but silence, not advice, but presence. To sit with someone as they take their final breaths, without trying to fix anything, is a profound act of love. In hospice work and end-of-life care, many people have described how spiritual presence, not religion, but presence, makes all the difference. A person may be in pain, may be afraid, but when someone sits beside them with compassion, with grounded stillness, the fear begins to soften, the breath deepens, the moment becomes sacred, and even in the face of death, there is peace. The Buddha once told the story of a mother who lost her only child. She was inconsolable. She ran from house to house asking for medicine to bring her child back. Finally, she came to the Buddha, and he told her he could help, but first, she had to bring him a mustard seed from a home that had never known death. She searched all day, but every home had known loss. Slowly, her heart began to open. She saw she was not alone. Her suffering was not personal, it was part of the human experience. And in that understanding, healing began. This story reminds us that grief, though painful, is also a doorway. It connects us, it humbles us, it brings us back to what is essential. In grieving, we do not lose our strength, we rediscover it. We remember that love is not bound by time. That presence is more important than possession. That letting go is not the end of love, but its purest form. And so, death becomes not just something that happens at the end of life, but something that teaches us how to live. It strips away the non-essential. It calls us to be real, to be kind, to be awake. When we internalize this, we begin to live each day not as a rehearsal, but as the main act. We stop waiting for some future moment to begin. We realize, we are already in the middle of our story. And what we write now matters. The words we speak, the silences we hold, the compassion we offer, the courage we show. This is the legacy we leave. Not what we built, but how we loved. And when the time comes, when the breath slows, when the eyes close, we will not cling in panic. We will rest in the practice we have lived. We will remember, I have prepared, I have practiced, I have loved, and in that remembrance, there is peace. Let us walk each day with this awareness, not with heaviness, but with gratitude, not with fear, but with reverence. Life is fragile, yes, but it is also luminous. And the more we understand death, the more deeply we can live. This is the heart of the Buddha's message. Not just to believe in rebirth, or to fear the consequences of karma, but to awaken now. To live with clarity now. To love fully now. Because this moment is all we ever truly have. And it is enough. As we come to the final reflection in this journey of understanding death, rebirth, and the teachings of the Buddha, we are invited not only to think, but to feel, not only to believe, but to be still in experience. Because the deepest truths are not grasped through thought alone. They are realized through awareness, through presence, through silence. This is where the Dhamma lives, not in books, not in doctrine, but in the quiet moments of our lives when we see clearly and feel deeply. All of us are walking toward death, every day. Yet, paradoxically, it is when we remember this truth that life becomes most vivid. The trees appear more vibrant. The breath becomes sacred. The people around us matter more. We stop sleepwalking through our days. We begin to live intentionally. This is what the Buddha offered, not a philosophy to debate, but a path to walk. One step, one breath, one mindful moment at a time. What happens after death is, in many ways, a continuation of how we have lived. The mind does not vanish when the body dies. It continues, shaped by habits, by intentions, by the qualities we have cultivated. If we have lived in fear, we may die in fear. If we have lived in love, we may die in peace. This is why every moment matters. Each moment is practice. Each moment is preparation. But the Buddha also pointed us toward a deeper freedom, a possibility of ending the cycle altogether. not through escape, but through awakening, through seeing directly into the nature of reality, through letting go of the craving that binds us to becoming. This is what nirvana means, not a place, but a state beyond the burning of desire, beyond the grip of ego, beyond the illusion of separateness. This state is not reserved for saints or sages. It is available to those who sincerely walk the path, who turn inward, who are willing to see, to feel, and to let go. It may take many lives, or it may take just one moment of profound clarity. No one can say when, but the possibility is always there. And that is the great gift of the Dhamma. It does not demand belief. It invites experience. It does not offer salvation by another. It offers liberation by your own insight. In Buddhist teachings, it is said that when one attains awakening, one becomes like a lotus flower, rising above the muddy waters of birth and death, untouched by them, yet still rooted in compassion for all beings. Because the awakened one does not escape the world. They simply are no longer bound by it. They live, breathe, eat, walk, and speak like everyone else, but their heart is free. Their mind is at peace. They see clearly, and in seeing, they love deeply. And so, as we reflect on all that has been shared, the reality of impermanence, the law of karma, the nature of rebirth, and the path to liberation, we return, again and again, to this present moment, this breath, this choice, because this is where the path begins. Always here, never elsewhere. Let us remember that death is not the opposite of life. It is part of life. Like dusk follows day, like the tide recedes after it rises. It is natural, it is necessary, it is sacred, and when we live with this understanding, we live with greater tenderness. We soften, we slow down, we stop clinging so tightly. We begin to trust. We trust not in outcomes, but in the process, not in permanence, but in presence, not in possession, but in participation. We understand that we are not separate from the great unfolding of existence, we are part of it. A single wave in the ocean, a single flame in the great fire of life. And this understanding does not diminish us. It frees us, because once we let go of the need to control, once we let go of the illusion of self as something fixed and separate, we can finally rest, we can finally breathe, we can finally love, not out of need, but out of fullness, not to get, but to give. This is the liberation the Buddha pointed to. A freedom not dependent on conditions. A peace not built on circumstances. A joy that arises from within, unshaken by gain or loss, praise or blame, birth or death. And this liberation does not make us indifferent. On the contrary, it makes us more human, more tender, more awake, because when we are no longer consumed by fear, we can be truly present with the suffering of others. We can offer comfort without needing to fix. We can sit with pain without needing to explain. We can simply be a healing presence, a calm light, a refuge. This is how the awakened ones walk in the world. And this is what we too can begin to practice. Not waiting for a perfect future. Not chasing distant enlightenment, but living each day with awareness, with kindness, with humility, one breath at a time, one step at a time. So if you take nothing else from this reflection, take this. Death is not the end. It is a mirror. It shows us how we've lived, and it invites us to live better, to live truer, to live more awake. Every act of mindfulness, every act of compassion, every moment of letting go. These are the seeds of a peaceful death. And they are also the seeds of a meaningful life. We do not need to fear what comes after this life. If we live with awareness, if we walk the path with sincerity, if we cultivate a heart of loving kindness, what follows will be a continuation of that beauty. And even if we do not yet see the end of the cycle, we will be moving toward it. Each life, each choice, each moment, bringing us closer to freedom. So let us not wait. Let us not postpone awakening. Let us begin here and now. With this very breath, with this very heart, with this very life. In the end, the question is not whether death is the end. The deeper question is, are we truly living before we die? Are we awake now? Are we present, open, and loving? If we are, then death loses its sting. Rebirth becomes simply another page. And freedom, true freedom, is already unfolding. May all beings be free from fear. May all beings awaken to the truth. May we each walk the path with courage and compassion. And when the time comes, may we pass not in confusion, but in peace. And perhaps, in that stillness beyond thought, beyond form, beyond birth and death, we will find what the Buddha pointed to all along. Not an answer, but a silence. Not an ending, but a liberation. Not a place, but a home we never truly left.